It's really a great pleasure and honor to be here with the industry leaders at New York. And also thank Mr. Peter Felix for the invitation. And it's really nice to be here today. And also, actually, New York is not a strange city to me. I'm really enjoying coming back to New York, as my two children actually are in New York. And my daughter has just finished her study at Columbia and then now works for Morgan Stanley. And my son is the Stern Business School at NYU. So this is almost like a second home. It's really nice to be here. Actually, I think it's right that Rich has really paved the way for my presentation in this section. And I've been talking about the globalization of China, the talent challenge. As we can see, China actually is really moving fast. I want to share a little bit of news, actually. Just last month, China actually, National Oil Offshore Oil Company has purchased a big company in Canada, and which is the largest takeover or purchase of a Chinese company in the world. But then, what are the talent challenges for Chinese companies? Chinese company bought a lot of companies like Lenovo a number of years ago, purchased the IBM PC division. It has actually the same initial challenge of the talent management. So I think that will present a really good story for all the people here, that when a Chinese company coming international, what are the talent challenges for them? So in this section, I'm actually going to talk about 4 areas. First, I want to cover some background of the situation about Chinese company going global, and then I want to also mention about China's specific talent needs, and more precisely, China's talent policies. Actually, China has made a big policy changes in the last number of years, and actually it's going to impact not only China, but I think also the rest of the world. And finally, I want to talk about our center, the Center for China and Globalization, related research on global talents. So the first is the background. As our center is the Center for China and Globalization, we have a series of about 3 stages of a globalization. So we have the first wave of international trade, which is a goods movement, goods flow. And then we have a WTO to that. China actually now joined the WTO for 10 years. And in the last 10 years, China has enormous development. China's GDP has gone up 4 times. Its trade has gone up 5 times, and its foreign investment has gone up 60 times in the 10 years time since China joined WTO. So when they're knocking down the trade barriers, you can see China really moving fast. And then China now is the largest exporter in the world, also probably the largest trader in the world. And now we have the second wave of globalization, which is international finance. And we see the global capital movement, we see the US dollars, euros, and all those happening. And China also is catching up. China has the largest foreign exchange reserve, over 3 trillion US dollars right now. And so that's still, China is catching up. But I think it's crucial now. It's the third wave, the international talent, the global talent flow. As we see that, also Rachel mentioned about that as well, the talent is really the catchword for the next battlefield, actually, the next future key success factor. So we have the WTO for the global goods movement, we have the IMF for the global capital movement, but we don't have the World Organization for the talent movement. So I would like to propose we have a new WTO, World Talent Organization, to really regulate this 20% of the top people moving around the world. I think AESC should really take a lead for that, and this is a suggestion I can make. The next trend I want to talk a bit about is the talent movement in China. Actually, China is in a transitional period. We have just, actually, there's 2 Congress going on in China right now. I have actually identified 8 transformations going on in China. The first is from population dividend to talent dividend. What is driving China in the last 30 years is basically we have 250 million migrant workers. They move around China, flow around China, and that really made China the manufacturing center of the world. But according to the National Talent Development Plan, which I have also participated in drafting that, China is going to actually have 200 million college graduates by 2020 in the working force. So from 200 million migrant workers to 200 million college graduates, There's actually an article in the New York Times about a month ago about China is not only producing goods, but also produce college graduates. The reporter actually interviewed me on that story. So I think, that really is a big shift. 200 million college graduates in the working population in the next decade. So that's enormous. So another trend is from made in China to create in China. China is manufacturing on the value chain at the bottom, but now China is trying to catch up and climb up the value chain and want to be innovative in China. And also, from attracting capital, financial capital to attract human capital, China actually is not lacking money. China has the largest foreign exchange reserve in the world. China is lacking now its talent, top talent. So that's what's happening. The fourth transformation is from hardware to software. These days, if you go to China and see all the buildings, all the high rises, three gorgeous dams, Expo, Olympics, it's marvelous hardware. But where is the software? You have lots of buildings, but where are the talents in the buildings? So that is another transformation. The fifth transformation identified is from investment-driven economy to a talent-driven economy. China, basically, the fixed income investment accounts about 50% of the GDP growth, whereas China's service sector is only 44%. So US is about 80%, and Hong Kong is about 95%, and even India is 55%. So from China, from 40% to 60, 70, 80, that's where the high-paid job is going to be made, and that's where the talent is going to be needed. And I think that's really the China's also changing right now, is from that big shift. Another trend is from resource-driven economy to a knowledge-driven economy. China can no longer sustain its big spending on the cost of the environment. Lots of consume the biggest steel in the world, consume the biggest cement in the world, and consume the biggest coal in the world. So I think that model is not going to work anymore. And from emphasis on science and technology innovation to both science and social innovation, China is talking about social innovation now. So that's actually is a healthy time. And finally, a trend is from rely on the domestic talent to rely on the international talents. So China has actually, in the last few years, launched a number of programs aimed at international talents. I think also that actually provided opportunities for our members here in this conference, which I'm going to talk more about. And also, we see as we seen from previous presentation, there's a high-speed flow of talents. According to the United Nations, there's about 240 million people living, working outside the country they were born. And that actually accounts about 3% of the world population, and it's even increased at 3% every year. And among those 200 population, 90 million are skilled immigrants and investor immigrants. So that's actually the talent portion. As a matter of fact, these days the traffic between China and the US is very heavy. There's about, according to the Chinese ambassador to the United States, about 10,000 people across Pacific every day. And also US has issued over 1 million visa to the Chinese visitors. And also last year is 1.3 million, a big increase. And according to the newest US Open Door report, Chinese student enrollment in the United States has increased by 23% in 1 year. So China now is the last country in terms of sending students to the United States. So we see this movement is really getting fast. But now we want to see what China enterprises talent demand. And that's how they go. Our Chinese firms really need overseas talents. Can we help them finding overseas talents? So that's really another thing I want to talk about. So first is the development of Chinese strengths of the Chinese companies. As we see from all materials, all sources, Chinese companies are really getting bigger and faster. And as also previous speaker mentioned, more prestigious now for Chinese students to work with. And for example, in the Fortune 500 company, there's about 66 company are Chinese company in the Fortune 500 country. Of course, most of them are state-owned enterprises companies, SOEs. But we can also see that the Chinese company, the management is really getting old. For example, the Chinese state-owned enterprises, the average is about 53, 54 years old. Whereas in Korea, companies 52 years old is not that better anymore. But also for the private companies like Haier and even semi-private like Huawei, their age is in the mid-40s. So we see, the Chinese, this age structure for the Chinese top CEOs are really getting old, and there's a lot of replacement going to happen. And that means a lot of opportunities probably for us to take into. And also, the Chinese development of overseas investment is rapidly happening. I think that you can see the trend is really growing. For example, in 2011, it counts about 77 billion US dollar overseas investment. And I think that's really also means there's more opportunities for them to do the overseas staffing and overseas recruitment. And China's development of overseas investment is really a big, I think in the next 10, 20 years, it was going to be a big phenomena happening. And so that's really, the new business is emerging for all of us here. And actually, according to the OECD report, China's SOE and overseas merger and acquisition has been on top of the old countries. They predict that China will account about 44% of the whole world merger and acquisition in last year. So this is really presents a lot of opportunities. And also, not only that, I mean, we see a list of events happening about Chinese company going global. There's a company buying a lot of sectors. There's a lot of areas, leasing, merger acquisitions, resources acquisition, etc. So the list goes on and on. If you really make a list detail of that, that's really quite impressive, and actually a lot of opportunities there. But I think that the challenge for them is how can they manage all this international expansion with international top management to manage that. Also, the development of China's overseas investment, I think the lack of international talent, global talent, is the largest obstacle for the Chinese companies. And there's even more opportunities for them to come out, but the problem is that they don't have the talent to help them on that. Actually, again, McKinsey was quoted in the Chinese Board Forum in 2008. 88% of executives in China thought lack of talent is the top obstacles on overseas investment. And 90% thought they cannot achieve internationalization unless they cultivate capable leaders in their companies. So not only that, actually the Chinese government also realized that the state-owned assets supervision, which is a body look after all the Chinese companies, 10 years ago they said they're going to hire globally. They have a program called Hire Globally. And then out of these 10 years, they had about, out of the 150 companies that they have, they actually tried to recruit about 110 top executives. But the global hiring ended up, 90% was still hired in China. Only about 10% were hired globally. So it's actually, they have to change that, they have to really expand that. But we see some good examples like Lenovo, a company that we probably know, that 7 of the 11 directors are foreigners. We talked about board of directors just now, but I think Lenovo has set a good example for good companies in China that really need international talent. So the senior talent shortage in China is really a big opportunity for us to tap into. As a matter of fact, again, McKinsey has actually did some research on that a few years ago, that China currently has only about 3,000 to 5,000 capable top managers, whereas in China they need 75,000 in the next 5 to 10 years. So the market growth is enormous. And the local hire understand China's business environment, and so that really, we have a lot of obstacles, language, culture, and so those skills are not cultivated in one day, and that really provide a lot of opportunity for the international talents. And as a matter of fact, the Chinese enterprises are anxious to recruit foreign top executives. And we have many examples happening like that. And the Chinese Construction Bank has hired foreigners as a CEO, and China Netcom actually used to nominate quite a number of foreigners to be on their board. And actually, we talk about Chery purchased Volvo, and then this company, it's a private company in China, actually hired and used the foreigners to be really on their board and also on their team. So this is a summary about Chinese state-owned enterprises. But then I want to carry on with the policy changes that China happened in the last few years. Well, we all know China just had its 18th Party Congress, and they actually, in that Party Congress report, they have said they're going to form a talent system advantage with international competitiveness. And so basically, they want to utilize a talent as a strategy to revitalize China into the next development. As a matter of fact, in the last few years, China has cultivated a called China National Talent Development Plan, 2010 to 2020. And then in that talent development plan, they actually had many specific items. For example, the total talent pool will increase from 140 million to 180 million. And then the ratio of the R&D talent in labor force will increase from 22% to 43%. And also, the ratio of the labor force with higher education will increase from 9.2% to 20%, which almost like 200 million college graduates. So we see this big shifting and big emphasis on the Chinese government talent plan to really put on emphasis. As a matter of fact, in that talent development plan, there's a series, new plan has been launched. In 2008, they have launched the Southern Talent Program aimed at recruiting foreign talents. And 2010, there's a Young Southern Talent Program, and also the Southern Foreign Export Program aimed at the non-Chinese experts. And also in China, we're all familiar with the special economic zone that Deng Xiaoping has set it up in the early 80s. And now they're calling to set up special talent zones, which all kind of talent policy can be implemented, experimented as well. And then last year, they even set a bigger plan called the 10,000 people plan. So you can see, this Chinese characteristic of different plans, but really it's really effective. That has a lot of result. For example, for the 1,000 talent program, they have recruited 3,300 people back to China, and that's really impressive. And also on the business side, the plan calls for cultivating 100 business leaders and CEOs who can lead the Chinese firms reaching the ranks of Fortune 500 companies by 2020. Now they already have 64 Fortune 500 companies, and then so that target they're going to meet by next 5-10 years. So which means they're going to have really need a lot of top talents, and also they're going to have to having a total 40,000 international business savvy talents working for state-owned enterprises by 2020. And 50% of them have to be hired through the market. And that actually stipulated in the National Talent Development Plan, which is, again, I think the opportunities for research firms to really help on this respect. As also this 4,000 talent program is already kicked in and has already hired a lot of people already. About almost 100 top non-Chinese top talents was hired. As a matter of fact, when Mr. Peter Felix was in Shenzhen last year, we saw a ceremony about Chinese government awarded about almost 50 foreign experts on the stage, giving them a certificate, ordering them coming to China. And also the facilitation of the policy of overseas talent to work in China. The China has now set up a new talent visa. We have recommended government that they have set up a talent visa, especially for foreign talent. And also they have a green card that they issued for the foreigners as well. There is also the permanent green card has been set it up in the country. And so there's a series of new policies has been really established. And also I can give a few examples. For example, the Ross McLeister was hired as the Chief Information Officer for Sinopec, one of the biggest Fortune 500 company in China. And he's one of these foreign experts of 1,000 Talent Program. And we see that Greg Jib was hired into a Ping An insurance company, also one of the biggest company in China, as the Deputy General Manager in China. And we see also Jeff Lehman, who was the president of Cornell University, and he actually founded the Peking University Law School in Shenzhen, and now he is the vice chancellor of NYU campus on China in Shanghai, and also one of the foreign thousand talent examples that China has been importing. And also we see people also being hired into universities, in the Chinese universities. And again, many examples like that. There's a big demand in the universities. Finally, I want to just 1 or 2 minutes talk about some of our research. We actually do a lot of research on the global talent. CCG is actually now the leading think tank on global talents in China. Actually, last year I have co-authored a book with a report with a few famous scholars in the US. And we have actually found that there's a lot of returning going back because of economic opportunities, because of a lot of reasons, family ties and things like that. And the number of people going back is increasing, and there's really, there's a trend of people going back to China on opportunities. We also published the annual Blue Book, which is very authoritative and influential in China about global talents. Actually, we have published about on returnees in China last year. And then for example, the number of people going back in China is in big numbers, and I don't want to go into detail of that. And then also there's a combination about domestic and foreign talents, how they can make a team. We have done a lot of studies on that as well. And then there's another report we have published in China with the Social Science Academy Press about the Chinese international migration, which has actually got a really big attention by a lot of media in China. It's the first time China ever published this kind of a report. And we found that the Chinese investor immigrants and the skilled immigrants going to the United States, Canada, Australia, and all that countries accounts about almost 200,000 every year. And also we have published a report about Chinese students study abroad, which is now the biggest industry in many Chinese educational front, is sending students overseas. For example, last year there's about 400,000 students coming out of China study in the foreign countries, half of them coming to the United States. And also there's about 250,000 going back to China last year. And so the number is really staggering. And also we have published many books. We have published both National Strategy, Talent Change the World, and this book actually recommended by party chief in Guangdong province as a must read for all the officials in Guangdong province. And also last year we talked about entrepreneur and business elite of China, and this was published in the UK, which is talk about all the 110 top Chinese overseas returnees. And same thing for a new book I just published last few months called Globalizing China, Influence Strategies and the Success of Chinese Returnees. And also it's quite a description about Chinese talent phenomena. And then finally, the new book published in January this year, Immigration Wave, How China Can Return Talent. So there's a lot of study and we have done on that. I think the time is short. I want to end here and thank you very much for your attention.